And welcome. Good morning. Thank you for attending the session. This session will be focused on the comparative analysis of adherence to federal regulations on defining programs leading to professional licensure. Again, I'm Lisa Carbone from Nova Southeastern University's College of Education and School of Criminal Justice, and I'm going to allow my colleague to introduce himself.
Okay. Again, I'm Ken Rockensees. I'm the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs with the Fisher College of Education and School of Criminal Justice at Nova Southeastern University.
So here's just a brief overview. Today's presentation is focused on a critical topic that directly impacts distance education programs. It's imperative to ensure online programs adhere to regulatory standards while maintaining accessibility to learners. And today we have a packed agenda, so we'll go ahead and jump right in. So throughout this presentation, we'll delve into the background, as you could see, on the federal regulations, definitions and challenges as it relates to professional licensure programs, the strategies for achieving compliance and enhancing accessibility in distance education. So whether you're in higher ed or a K-12 educator, administrator, or policymaker, I think you'll find valuable insights and actionable takeaways from our discussion today. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Rockensees, to walk us through the background on federal regulations.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, before I get started, I wanted to ask maybe if our three participants today, have you had any experience with state licensure or state authorization of programs that you deliver online outside of Florida or your home state? And just maybe put you.
My name is Beverly. Yes, I have.
Hi, Billy. Okay, good. And how about Rosalind? Oops, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Yes, I have.
You have, okay. And so you're familiar with the process and the authorization process. And but anyway, to summarize briefly the rules, last October 31st, the U.S. Department of Education approved new regulations to essentially strengthen their monitoring of the oversight of higher ed institutions. There were essentially three components to the rules. The first one was administrative capability, which centered largely on financial aid counseling, adequate career services, recruitment practices, and so on. The second component was certification procedures, and really looking at the processes that might mitigate risk to students and taxpayers. And the third was the ability to benefit, which is designed for providing financial aid eligibility for students who enter programs, students without high school diplomas to enter programs for eligible career pathway degrees. But basically, really kind of almost hidden in the certification procedures, the second component were the new rules. And as you look at it here, this is really an attempt to distill down essentially the four primary components of the rules. I should emphasize that's very important to understand that these apply to online programs that are delivered outside the state in which the institution is physically located. And they don't apply to students who enroll in, say, face-to-face programs or in the state where the institution is located, as long as it's, and that would include online as well as face-to-face programs. So it's important to, again, emphasize this has to do with the delivery of online education, distance education. The rules are set to become effective on July 1st. And so looking at the first one or second item, the regulations will require institutions to certify that programs leading to professional licensure satisfy applicable requirements, educational requirements in the state where the student is located. This is it seems very simple, but it's also a huge change in the way we've done things. In the past, for those of you who've worked with licensure and the authorization process, the states typically, if not always, have provided confirmation that a program does meet licensure requirements. Now the things have been reversed to a large extent, and so now the responsibility is on institutions to make that determination. Number three, for distance ed programs leading to professional licensure to be approved for federal aid, the institutions must certify, one, that they satisfy state educational requirements where the institution is located. And again, what that means is, now think about the workload here. That means going into each state's requirements for each of your programs and making a determination if that program meets certification requirements or not. The second bullet, satisfy state educational requirements where the student is located at the initial time of enrollment. Well, that's typically permanent address. And so the job of the institution is to ensure that the student's permanent address is verified in the system. And if that is the case, then to verify that the student applying to a particular program, that program meets the certification requirements in his or her own state. And the third bullet, satisfy educational requirements in the state where the student has provided an attestation that they intend to seek employment. This, I think, is one of the more interesting parts, components of the rules, because the student, if the student is, say, located in Alabama and wants to enroll in a master's in educational leadership, for instance, and the educational leadership program does not meet requirements in Alabama, but the student wants to seek employment in, say, Georgia, and seek residency in Georgia in the future, and the program does meet Georgia's requirements, then the student would be eligible to enroll the program so long as they attest that they will be moving to Georgia after they graduate. And the last item, number four, the new rules also require compliance with all state laws related to closure, record retention, teach-out agreements, tuition recovery, and so on. That typically is a component of all state authorization agreements. So I think, for the most part, most institutions probably have these procedures in place. But what I think will be an area that we'll need to focus on is if you have students enrolled in a program that after July 1st has been declared as not meeting state requirements, then that program will have to be taught out. So the institution needs to be aware of the teach-out requirements for the states in which students are currently enrolled and which a future program will no longer be recognized. Lisa?
Thank you, Tim. Okay, so we did a review, very informal analysis of 10 institutions, and I will say, since you both are familiar with this, how all of this works. The review, of course, was based on the existing regulations, so regulations that were in place since 2019. So we're not looking at what is to come as of July 1 of 2024. But we conducted this informal review, and this is specifically to review if the institutions provided a professional licensure definition. So why is this important, right? So under the federal regulations, are primarily aimed at enhancing consumer protection. However, these disclosures pose challenges for higher education institutions, as you know, especially for those offering online programs geared towards state licensure or certification preparation. So while consumer protection laws are universally supported, this presentation aims to offer a concise overview, really short overview of the current challenges, regulatory impact on out-of-state distance education programs. The primary objective, though, in our examination as to whether the institutions provided a definition of professional licensure, and if so, what language was used or how the professional licensure program was presented. Subsequently, again, we looked for commonalities in the language used and why we are analyzing this information. Again, while there are many components to the existing and new federal regulations that are to come, the Department of Education does not provide a definition. So there are concerns regarding inconsistencies, as well as potential missed opportunities to use this as a consumer education moment. So, again, if this is for the purposes of consumer protection, it's important to establish, some type of a standardized or consistent system of of presenting these public disclosures, and specifically for those programs that lead to certification and professional licensure, there is a lot of variation with regard to how the programs are defined and how the programs come across to prospective and current students. So if I were to pause for a moment and ask you, what does professional licensure program mean to you? What would you say? And you could say it, since we're a small group, you can, take yourself off of mute and say it and share what you think, or you can jot it down. But I'm just curious to know, going into this, not having any background, would you say from your experience, do you fully understand if you were not provided a definition, what do you think when you hear a professional licensure degree program? Any thoughts?
This is Beverly again. I would think teaching, nursing, things of that nature, making anything that requires for you to sit for some kind of exam so that you can practice.
Okay, that's correct.
And I'll just add to what Beverly said, which I thought was really well put, with perhaps in addition to or in place of an exam, maybe a practicum or internship in which they're evaluated of their competencies.
Okay, thank you for sharing your thoughts. So just to hearing both of you share, your thoughts, just from the top of your head, as you could see, there are a lot of different components that come into play when we're talking about a professional licensure degree program. And you are two individuals that are higher education individuals, and you have the background in this. So you can only imagine for prospective students and current students that don't have the background in this, that they're making decisions on programs without having perhaps adequate information, or information that may not be clear enough for them to make these decisions. So disclosure language that is kind of like in layman terms, disclosures that provide clear definitions as to what a program is and what a program is designed to do. So going back to what I mentioned before, we were looking specifically to see if an institution within their disclosure statements provided any type of definition of what the professional licensure programs were at their institution. Now, these are the institutions that we looked at, just a very random group of institutions, everything from state institutions, private, as well as for-profit. And just one note of correction here. Out of the 10, there were only 2 that we came across that actually had a clear definition for professional licensure. It was the University of Nevada, as you can see, is listed in green. The second institution was not the University of North Carolina. It should actually be Florida Atlantic University. So out of the group, there were only 2. So I found that to be kind of interesting, in that, these regulations have been in place since 2019. Here we are in 2024, and out of 10 institutions, there are only 2 that have it. Now, the federal regulations don't require it. However, again, I go back to the importance of the primary purpose is for consumer protection purposes. And so consumer protection really is also about ensuring that the consumer, which is in our community, the students, are making an informed decision with regard to whether or not they want to enroll in a program and whether or not the program is going to be beneficial to them. And please feel free to ask any questions at this time. I mean, we don't have to wait until the end of the presentation. I'd like this to kind of be kind of an informal conversation. So another approach to the public disclosures for some of the institutions, as you can see, this is one of the rules. Instead of offering a definition, some institutions simply reference the regulation in their disclosure. 34 CFR 668.43 encompasses elements similar to those found in the definitions used or established by the institutions. So as we, approach kind of the midway towards the end of this presentation, go on to a website, take a look, and at any institution, your own institution or an institution that you are curious about, and just go into their search field and put in professional licensure and see what comes up. View those disclosures, again, and then just kind of take a look to see what's out there. And see if they have a definition, see how they kind of see what they have versus maybe what your institution has. And it's kind of helpful to know what we're all doing. That was one of the important steps for us to do as I work directly with professional licensure and state authorization. I went on to the websites of different institutions to kind of see, what is everybody doing? And I waited pretty late on because, when the regulations first came into place back in 2019, 2020, we were all just putting all this together. Okay, so now this has been around for several years. Now I could see, okay, we've been in this for a while. Let's see how everyone has established themselves. Let's see what we've all come up with. And, it's just surprising to see that there's a lot of variation across the institutions. Let me move on to the next slide here. So again, as I mentioned, 2 out of the 10 FAU, and this is the actual language directly from the websites. FAU, I got another window blocking me here. Sorry. A professional licensure program is an academic program that is designed, marketed, and or advertised to meet the educational requirements for a specific license. University of Nevada also provides the code in their definition, and it states requires that the university publicly disclose whether the programs that are designed for, sorry, I can't see the advertised meet the educational requirements for an initial license. So it's a little different, but it does provide a definition. As opposed to the other 8 institutions that does not provide any kind of descriptive definition with regard to what a professional licensure degree program is. I'm going to kind of go through the rest of this pretty quickly here. So again, all of this serves as an example as to, where we are since July 1 of 2020. I think this presents a valuable opportunity to observe changes or adjustments that we could make with the new rule coming up in July 1 of 2024, kind of taking a look at the lay of the land, what your institution is doing, what other institutions are doing as well. And to kind of wrap this up, if you were able to visit a website or at some point after the presentation, perhaps, take a look at the definitions and another note is to also look at where the definition and information is located. It was another area that we noticed a lot of variation. Some institutions had it listed under like consumer information. Some institutions has it listed as what it is, professional licensure. Some title it state authorization and approvals. at our institution at Nova, we, I believe, have it titled under distance education disclosures and student complaints. You know, you have a number of different ways that these institutions are presenting this information. And while there is no wrong or right way, and the federal regulations don't provide us with any prescribed way of you know, publishing this information, we have to go back and think about, again, consumer protection, consumer education, you know, those prospective students that are looking at different programs at different institutions, you know, and not having background or understanding any of this, you know, are seeing these things. You know, they're going from one school and seeing consumer information and this disclosure information on one page where it may or may not have a definition, and then to another school that has, you know, may have something under professional licenses and just has another disclosure with a definition. There's a lot of variation. It could be very confusing. It's confusing to a lot of our own colleagues that are not versed in this area. So I can only imagine for students. And I don't see that this is going away. As you know, that there are more rules that are to come in 2024, 2025. So a few things to think about, and I'll leave you with this, is, you know, maybe go to your website or go to a site of a school that you may be curious about and see if you can locate their professional licensure disclosure. Think about what steps can the higher education community take to enhance consumer education practices for professional licensure programs. And does your institution, most importantly, does your institution offer a clear definition of professional licensure? And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ken to see if there are any questions or last comments.
Any thoughts or reactions?
That is all great information and thought-provoking too, about providing information for professional licensure.
Yeah.
For everyone, so that everyone can have that information.
Yeah, yeah. I think that our attorneys at Nova have advised us to really begin moving forward very quickly. You know, between now and July 1st, it's a pretty narrow period of time too. So there's several things that we need to look at. At your institutions, Beverly or Rosalind, do you know if how your institutions will be affected at all? Has there been discussions about the new rules?
This is not my direct area of concern, but obviously at least an indirect area of concern. So it's making me want to reach out to our administration who do deal with that to see what we are doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think from our vantage point too, colleges of education around the country, which, as you know, across all the states, the certification requirements vary and they change pretty regularly too. So it's really putting a lot of burden, I guess, on the institutions to make sure that they're managing the process. We were talking yesterday too that, okay, so we get all the information about what programs meet and do not meet certification. And then with the pending changes or expected changes over time, how will that infrastructure be maintained? Who will be monitoring that? And how will we ensure every year? Do we check every year? Do we check every 6 months? So there's still a lot of loose ends that we need to make a determination about.
Indeed, indeed. Well, thank you so much, Lisa and Ken, for this thought-provoking and informational session. Really appreciate it, especially your experience and your expertise. So we will now close this session and allow our next presenters to get ready. Thank you again, Lisa and Ken, and look forward to connecting with you more.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for participating.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Bye.